we'll just play the piece and then talk about it.
Spent the whole day there. Just the two of us staring at the water.
Anyway? What do you mean, anyway?
So, I've got my piano here, and we've got a new musical theme that we've been introduced to. So, in the original game, there is a piece called Magdalene, and it plays one time in the game. Halfway through the game, after the hospital sequence, or at the end of the hospital sequence, you are running away from Pyramid Head with Maria, this doppelganger of Mary, and she doesn't escape. You get to the elevator doors start to close, you try to hold them open for her. Maria is trying to get in, and Pyramid Head stabs her and kills her. The doors close, and James is left alone in the elevator, and this piece plays, Magdalene. Just a very simple piano melody. In the original, it doesn't even have those additional bass notes or the kind of like diversion from the melody. It just plays this 4 times in a row. And then does a couple of chords that, if I'm remembering correctly and I'm playing this in the right key, would be... I need to actually learn this piece. There it is. And it plays that, what I just played, twice. And it's a gorgeous piece of music. And speaking specifically to that original version, which is that you do get that version again in the same moment in the remake, and it's called what is it called? Magdalene's Grief or something like that. They came up with slightly different names for all the tracks that they re-recorded for the remake, so that they would be differentiated on like Spotify and stuff. Magdalene's Elusive Lament. And the reason I want to talk about that theme initially is to talk about it from a musical aspect. On the original soundtrack, it is the only track that is just piano. There are a lot of tracks that use piano, but they're often layered with other synth noises. They often have a lot more going on harmonically. And I think the reason that that particular piece was written that way for that particular moment is like it's just piano. There's nothing else, and it's a very simple melody, and it just has this vulnerability to it. There are a lot of ways the piano is used in Akira Yamaoka's soundtracks where there's a term in music in general called prepared piano, and typically it refers to like if you're playing on an acoustic piano, like putting stuff on the strings to affect the tone somehow. Like sometimes it might just be like for some reason the thing that's popping into my head is like throwing like metal on the strings, like nails and stuff, to like give it a scratchier tone or something, or to like stop the notes from ringing out the way they typically would. It's basically an analog way to change the sound of a piano. And it's often what I think of when I think about the different ways that Akira Yamaoka uses piano on his soundtracks. He doesn't always just use straight up piano. Either there's other instruments as part of the arrangement, or sometimes he produces the piano in particular ways. Like he'll make it sound like it's coming from a radio, or it'll have a warble on it or something. Different ways he manipulates the sound of the piano to distort it or make it sound creepier or give it a different quality. The same way a guitarist might use a bunch of different pedals to give their guitar different tones. And I think there's something very poignant about that, the fact that Magdalene, this theme from the original game, he doesn't do that at all. It's kind of this honesty, this vulnerability, that just this solo piano, this simple melody that doesn't even have too much additional harmony. It's so exposed. The thing that I appreciate so much that they did for the remake is they heard that piece and they were like, we can do more with this. We can turn it into a theme that carries throughout the game, because we already have the Promise theme. We even have what I think of as Angela's theme, the forest theme that plays in the graveyard and then again during Promise Reprise. But that piece only plays at the Magdalene piece only plays during Maria's death, and I think it is supposed to hearken to Mary's death as well, the way that every time Maria dies harkens to Mary's death. What they've done with the remake is they've introduced it much earlier, used it as a way to point James in the direction of Rosewater Park, so it's not just like, I think in the original game at the beginning James is like, our special place, do you think she means the park? And it's like, okay, that's an easy way to point the player in a certain direction. This, on a storytelling level, gives it so much more weight. Like, because there are there's like all this in the real world, all these studies that have been done about how music can bring back memories and help people remember. And in a game where James is actively, he has amnesia, and in some ways he's actively trying to forget, this is something that pulls him back and restores some of his memory and is starting to guide him in the right direction. And I think it's really interesting that it then breaks. The record breaks. And it's this idea of... Cleo and I were talking about this in our email chain, I think, about how at various points throughout the game you can kind of question what Silent Hill is trying to actually do. It's like, well, Pyramid Head is trying to punish James for what he's done, but then you've got then you've got Maria who's trying to be like, oh no, here's a new version of Mary, and then Pyramid Head kills her, and it's like, okay, so, and then you've got the monsters that attack James. Are they trying to keep him from learning the truth, or are they just trying to punish him further? And the thing that is beautiful about the Silent Hill games and this idea of it being this place, this psychical place of psychic energy that manifests things on behalf of the people who are there, is that all of that stuff can reflect the psyche of the character, and humans are messy and they contradict themselves, and so there is definitely a part of James that wants to remember the truth and face it, but there's also a part of him that doesn't. And so I think that is part of why the record breaks. It's because it's starting to, James is starting to remember, and there's that part of his brain that's like, no, I want to stay in denial. I don't want to remember because that it's too awful to remember everything. And so I think that is part of why the record breaks, beyond it just being a creepy moment to disrupt the poignancy of it. Other things to talk about musically. So this theme, they took it and they turned it into a theme for Mary and Maria. And I think we'll talk about it more when it comes back with Maria. But another thing that Cleo and I talked about was how there is all this stuff in the game that blurs the line between Mary and Maria, where Mary is James's real wife, and then Maria appears to almost to be like, hey, you lost your wife, but I can be her. I can be better than her. And there is this tug of war in James's psyche of, like, what does he really want? Does he want his original wife back? Does he want to face the truth? Or does he want this other possibility that has been offered to him? This woman who looks like his wife, sounds like his wife, but is like the sexier version of her, the more alive version of her. Although even that is subverted in the Maria ending, where they're walking back to the car and she starts to cough, and he says, "You're gonna have to do something about that cough." And it is like such a dark, fucked up moment for so many reasons. This version of the Magdalene theme, Anam Cara, there's another thing to talk about. On the soundtrack, this version that we just heard is called Anam Cara, which is an Irish phrase that means soul friend. And first of all, I have Irish background. I love Irish stuff. I've dug into Irish mythology and stuff. I want to learn Irish Gaelic, even though it's not really as useful as other languages because they only speak it in Ireland. But, you know, it's a cool language. All of its words are monstrosities of consonants and vowels. Soul friend. I think the thing I like about that phrase is I don't think it specifically has to reference a romantic relationship, but it works really well in a situation like this where it's, oh yeah, Mary, that was his soul friend. This was the first piece of music that they released for the new game. The very first, if I'm remembering correctly, the very first teaser that they released for the Silent Hill 2 remake had this extended version of the Magdalene theme, and the moment I heard it, I was like, oh, that I knew that Akira Yamaoka had worked on it and had done the re-recording and everything, so I knew it was coming from him, and it sounded like his style, and I was like, whatever happens with the game, I think I'm really gonna love the soundtrack. And then to see that, like so many things in the remake, they were able to take that theme and be so intentional with it and intensify storytelling themes and musical themes and emotional themes. It was such a beautiful choice. And again, it was a nice way to center Akira Yamaoka's work very early on in the game and highlight it in a way that felt natural to the world, which brings up another thing I was going to talk about with this music. I've kind of been looking at these music talks as a potential way to be like, hey, here's a way to talk about music theory by way of Silent Hill. There's a term used in media called a couple of terms, diegetic and non-diegetic. You may have heard it referenced in filmmaking, where it's like specifically when it comes to music, there is diegetic music, stuff that is playing in the scene, like a jukebox playing a song, a radio playing a piece of music, a woman singing a song on a stage. And then there's non-diegetic music, which is usually the movie's score. It's the stuff that the characters themselves are not hearing. this is a moment where we have a piece that starts out diegetic. We're hearing the song on the jukebox, and then it transitions into being non-diegetic. When we get the flashback to Rosewater Park, you can hear on a production level, like, oh, it no longer sounds like it's coming from the jukebox with that, like, crackly, the record crackle and everything. We're just hearing it as the music that underscores the flashback. There's like philosophy when it comes to melody writing that is just one way to write melody, but the space between notes is called steps in music, and they're usually that's called a half step because it's 2 steps, and then this is a whole step. It's a full step between these 2 notes. This is kind of considered a half step because it's like, oh, this isn't a note that's natural to the scale that we're playing. If we want to demonstrate it in a different scale, we got whole step, half step. Steps are just the space between notes. When it comes to melodies, there is a line of thinking where, like, oh, melodies that have mostly stepwise motion are going to be very catchy, very easy to remember because they don't jump around. Like, if I play something that's like, sounds pretty, but doesn't sound like a melody that is going to stick in your head. But if I play something like the Magdalene theme, that is something that is going to be much easier to remember. And so, like, even on a like music theory level, we've got this idea of memory, a simplistic melody that is going to stick in your head. And for James, recalls this moment of happiness with his wife. And there's a power in that simplicity. There's a power in stepwise melodies. There are plenty of beautiful melodies that aren't just stepwise motion, but like as other examples of stuff that uses stepwise motion, a lot of the melodies in The Sound of Music. I remember my music theory teacher in college talking about how like Sound of Music has stepwise melodies all over the place. You got the hills are hold on. The hills are alive with the sound of music. Yeah. There's no big jumps between those notes. They're all right next to each other. And then do, a deer, a female deer, ray, a drop of golden sun. Like, it's a really easy way to get the ear used to something, or like to convey something quickly and have it be appealing to the ear. And you'll find in other places in the soundtrack, Akira Yamaoka will use like leaps between notes and irregular intervals between notes to unsettle or to make you feel unmoored in the aural landscape. Like the beginning of Promise of the Forgotten, when we get to that scene, it starts with some leaps like that where it's just like stuff like that. And it does kind of give you that feeling of like, oh, I'm not grounded in any particular place. Last thing I was going to bring up that I have here in my notes is one of the things that Akira Yamaoka has referenced as a big influence on his music. Like, there's obviously 90s industrial influence from like Nine Inch Nails and Portishead and the more industrial sounding tracks. But when it comes to stuff like this, that has a bit more of a traditional or classical feel, he specifically references Baroque music in one or two of the interviews he's talked about where his influences come from. And that influences his piano playing. But I think it's a very specific influence for him when it comes to the Silent Hill music, because Silent Hill is so much about like the shadow side, the other side. There's the town as we see it, and then there's the other world. And one of the big things about the Baroque movement in music and art is this idea of, in philosophy, is this idea of like, oh, people have a shadow side, and they express that through art, through like chiaroscuro shading in paintings, where it's like you've got really bright stuff in the foreground and then really dark shadows in the background. You hear it in music, where you will have like very bright, lively pieces contrast with really dark minor key pieces, and it feels very appropriate in a game that is in a story that is so much about like there being two sides to everything, there being like a surface level and a deeper level, that Akira Yamaoka would utilize the sensibilities of the Baroque era in the way that he's writing the music. And I think that's the last thing that I wanted to talk about with this particular music.